Okay, I want to end this week with a couple of fallacies we hear from the crypto crowd, statements that are simply untrue. I've said this before. The crypto space, I think, is premised on a lot of misinformation, and I think the success of crypto and the acceptance of crypto from a large part of the investing community is premised on misinformation and keeping people misinformed, or at least saying, I'm not going to inform an already uninformed crowd because their lack of information is my opportunity. But I'm just going to go over two really big ones. I have put some trades in place on IBIT and MSTR, and you can find them in the applied level in the portfolio construction module. I have started some experimental positions based on the crowd, not on the crypto itself. I couldn't care less about the crypto. I'm betting on the religion, not the God. So let's look at some fallacies. Number one, there is nothing backing fiat. That is untrue. A true statement is there is nothing backing crypto. And I can give you an easy thought experiment to prove that is true. To say there is nothing backing fiat is to ignore a balance sheet. A government has assets and it has liabilities. We always pay attention to the liabilities. But a government has assets. It has strategic gold reserves. It has strategic petroleum reserves. It owns a whole bunch of land. It owns a whole bunch of buildings. All of the minerals underground it owns. If you want to extract them, there are royalties that have to be paid. It owns all the air above your head. That's called spectrum. It owns all of that air above your head, and it has billions of dollars of that it can monetize and sell. So the currency is backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, which owns a whole ton of assets. Well, a ton, more than a ton, hundreds of tons of gold alone. To understand what's backing currency, I'm going to make a broad sweeping statement, then I'm going to prove it. Every single asset in existence in the United States right now, every single asset that exists is backing the currency. Every single asset. So let me explain how that works. Originally, how money was created was somebody showed up with so many grains of gold. And if you had so many grains of gold, you bring it to a bank, and a bank would give you banknotes saying, well, what denomination do you want? You're going to be in the general town for a while buying stuff. And maybe they brought in $35 of gold. $35 of banknotes were created so that they can go out and purchase things. You could say that $35 in gold was backing $35 in notes. And these people went out and spent, and pretty soon everyone just started circulating the notes because, well, if I went to the bank to get the gold, I would just redeposit the gold saying, you got the safe, you guys hang on to that. More economic activity, more gold was mined, bring it to the bank, more notes were made. So the money supply was increasing at the rate of production of gold. It wasn't a constant money supply, it was increasing at the rate of gold. What was noticed was this: the faster the money supply increased in certain regions, the more vibrant the economy became, the better the standard of living in that environment. So it became clear that if you want a rising standard of living, you need an increasing money supply or an increasing source of money supply. Well, gold is only one thing. Gold is just one thing. What if it were silver? What if it were copper? What if it were platinum? What if it were palladium? What if it were oil? Right? All of these things, as soon as you bring them out of the ground, they suddenly have value. Let's take it one step further. What if it were labor? What if it were 1 hour of your labor that created something? Well, that is an asset in itself. So I can take some of my fiat currency and I can buy a house. Let's say at Bitcoin at 100,000, I take my $500,000 of fiat currency and I buy a house. Or I can buy 5 Bitcoin. I've bought some I'll be generous and call Bitcoin an asset, even though I think it's just a collectible. But let's say that you could buy a house or you could buy 5 Bitcoin. Here is how you can demonstrate, because both of them have $500,000 of value. Both of them have that. You've got your 500,000 in fiat currencies being backed by a house because you did pay for that, or being backed by 5 Bitcoin. Now turn off the power. I still have my house. Do you have your Bitcoin? Let's say that you have a nationwide blackout. I've still got my assets. Do you have yours? You have nothing. I want you to think long and hard about this. What is backing Bitcoin? Don't tell me, well, there's only 21 million. No, that's a limitation on the size of the supply. That doesn't tell me anything that's backing it. What is backing it? Nothing. What is backing fiat currency? All the strategic petroleum reserves, all the strategic gold reserves, all the minerals underground, all the air above the land, all the roads, all the buildings, all the national parks, a lot of the rivers, a lot of the water supply, every single asset that's owned everywhere, because the money supply increases at the rate of GDP growth, roughly on average about 6% a year. I don't know where the crypto people get their 15% and 10% and 14%. I've heard ridiculous numbers, and you can look it up on Fred. The average is about 6% a year. This goes way back. The increasing the money supply goes way back to the time when you had kings and treasuries, and you had somebody who was watching the treasury. And there was a time when the head of the treasury was debasing the currency. In other words, not putting as much silver in the coin as they should. But what happened, what the king noticed over time is, with a certain amount of debasement, prosperity increased. With a certain amount of debasement. That's called partial reserve banking. With a certain amount of debasement, economic prosperity increased. We live in complex systems. Any economic system, any social system is a complex system. So in a complex system, you cannot maximize. You can only optimize, because a complex system involves trade-offs. So when you see a negative outcome, that's because we have more of a positive outcome. We've accepted the trade-off. Crypto wants to pick on a few negative outcomes and say, aha, we solved these negative outcomes, without understanding that, whoa, what are your trade-offs though? That if we substitute for your currency, what would your trade-offs be? The trade-offs of a fixed currency size would be significant. That you would, if you lived in a system, let's say that we lived in a system of a fixed currency. The blockchain today and the crypto today would be an unlimited currency, would be a currency that grows at the rate of economic growth. And it would be radical. It would be so radical because it would solve so many of the big problems of a fixed currency. You can't just say, well, it's fixed, it solves these negatives. Yeah, but these negatives are acceptable negatives because of the positives you get. You get this increase in economic activity. And that'll become clear when I talk about the second fallacy that crypto bros like to throw out there. Central banks print money and devalue the currency. Nope, they do not. They do not. And to demonstrate that, all you need to do is find a situation in which there are no central banks and the money supply increases. And we look no further than the free banking era. You brought gold to a bank. There's the gold sitting in the bank, and the notes are circulating. It didn't take long before the bank manager said, all this gold sitting there, it's doing nothing. We could earn some money on this gold. Why don't we print some extra notes to go into circulation, and then they'll come back and they'll deliver gold plus interest, and we'll make a little bit of extra gold. No one will ever know because no one ever comes and takes this stuff. So they do. So instead of 100 notes out there, you now have 110 notes out there. The money supply just increased. The money supply just increased. And what happened over time, this became known as fractional reserve banking, is that the cities that had banks during the free banking era, that had banks that were increasing the money supply, had more vibrant economies, higher levels of employment, higher standards of living. They were just better places to live versus other banks which really held to every note is backed by its share of gold. They grew at a slower rate. So this is the trade-off. You want a fixed currency? Well, then you have to expect a much lower level of economic growth because the velocity of money is fairly constant. So if you fix the supply of money and you have a velocity, you pretty much fix economic activity. So as your population grows, you're going to have to accept more poverty and more unemployment. Not only that, with a fixed amount of currency, it is possible for a few people to control almost all of it. Now you get pre-1789 France where you truly have the haves and the have-nots. And the haves were about 1%, and you had the 99% because they pretty much controlled everything. If we had a fixed money supply in a competitive economy, those who were good at competing would get the money. And now it becomes a zero-sum game. Because for you to get a dollar, you must get it from them. It's not enough for you to create value on your own and add to GDP and the money supply grow at the rate of GDP so that you can get some. You see, in this system, me having money does not preclude you from having it. But if the money supply were fixed, me having it does in fact preclude you from having it. And if I'm better at competing, I will, in time, own it all. And you will not buy a house, you will rent your house from me. And you will not ask for a certain amount of money, you will take whatever you can get because unemployment will be very high. Those are the trade-offs in any complex system. You can't look at the negatives of one system and say, tear it all down. You have to say, yeah, but that's the trade-off that we're willing to accept. What are the positives in response to that? Let's deal with this. Central banks print money. No, they don't. Central banks create reserves. They don't print money, they create reserves. Lending increases the money supply. They increase reserves, and then when the bank lends out money, they increase the money supply. That means when you show up at a bank and say, please, Mr. Banker, can I get a mortgage for this house? You are engaging in increasing the money supply. You are doing it. If you're against increasing the money supply, don't ask for credit. Get rid of your credit card. Only buy a house when you have all the money. Only buy a car when you have all the money. Only go to school when you have all the money. And you will not contribute to increasing the money supply. All of you do that. And you won't increase the money supply. If nobody demands loanable funds, you can't increase the money supply. All the central bank can do is increase reserves. Until they're lent out, it doesn't increase the money supply. You don't need a central bank in order to increase the money supply. What you need a central bank for is to control the increase in the money supply, because if you bring it back to these private bankers' greed, they'll lend out against 10% of their reserves, and they'll start making money. They'll say, we can go to 15, we can go to 20, we can go to 25, we can go to 30, and then a rumor starts that there's not enough gold, there's a run on the bank, and the whole system collapses. You have a very fragile banking system at that point in time, and many people would lose a lot of their money. Many people would lose because the bank would now have to go seize all those assets and force sell those assets. You'd wipe out whole economies at a time. The central bank is not there to increase the supply of money. The central bank is there to control the increase in the supply of money, because left unchecked, private enterprise would increase the money supply on their own. We have witnessed it. Without a central bank, there is no limit to the level of greed at which one bank will continue to increase the money supply by saying, hey, we're 50%, we can go to 60, we can go to 70, we can go to 80, until it all falls apart. So I would seem to think that, listen, if economic activity is way too low and banks are simply not lending, banks everywhere are like, well, we don't want to lend in this environment, it's 20% unemployment. Well, you're stuck in a trap. How do you get out of that trap? You're in a suboptimal trap. You can't get out of that trap because all the individual actors say it's not in my best interest to do anything. Then you have a central bank saying, okay, we can help out. Let's lower rates really low. Let's see if we can't get the demand for loanable funds up. And hopefully that comes from business who says at these rates it's worth investing, it's worth expanding, let's do this, let's do that. That creates employment, and there we go. Because without it, what would you do? Now you have a system, let's say that you had your private banks that are just printing way too much money. All these banknotes floating around, but there's not enough supply, so the price of everything is just going straight up and up and up. Rapid inflation because no one's controlling the growth of the money supply because you've left it in private hands. A central bank steps in and says, okay, that's enough of this, that's enough of this. Let's raise interest rates very high to decrease the demand for loanable funds. There we go. Now we have fewer banknotes being printed because banks are not lending this money anymore. That's what a central bank is there for, is to control the increase in the money supply that would happen in an unchecked system. What is crypto asking for? Stop regulating us. Let's get rid of all the regulations. And what are we cheering on for the Trump administration? Yay, lower bank regulations. And let's get rid of an independent Fed as well. Keep in mind, everything has a trade-off. Every time you say, well, let's push on this lever because this direction is good, you have to accept the other direction on something else is bad. You want less regulation in crypto, you're going to have more people lose money. You're going to have less protection for the consumer if that's really what you want. So we've gotten rid of the first statement, nothing backing fiat. There's a lot backing fiat, there's nothing backing crypto. If we think about it in terms of intrinsic and extrinsic value, they both have extrinsic value. Extrinsic value is the value we place on it, period. It has value because we place value on it. But fiat has intrinsic value, crypto has no intrinsic value, only extrinsic value. So take it both are the same. I'll take something that has some intrinsic value over nothing. Central banks do not print money, they print reserves. Banks print money by lending to people like you who say, please, Mr. Banker, lend me some money. Every time you swipe your credit card, boom, you're the problem. You're the problem. Stop getting loans for your education. Stop getting mortgages. Stop getting car loans, and you won't have this problem. You'll have a bigger problem, though. Do you see the trade-off? Right? Let's deal with this other part, devalue the currency. Wrong unit of analysis. I think that almost any economics graduate student would recognize that right away. It's the wrong unit of analysis, the currency. The appropriate unit of analysis is 1 hour of your labor. Because what is the currency? It's a medium of exchange. I produce an hour of labor, but I want some butter. I don't want to have to walk around to a butter manufacturer and say, could you use an hour of my labor? I want to be able to sell an hour of my labor to anyone, get some of this currency, and then use that currency to get some butter. So the true value that I would be looking at is the value of my labor, right? If your purchasing power is diminishing, blame the value of your labor, not the currency. Blame the value of your labor. To do a quick test on this, if we go to the minimum wage in 1970 versus the minimum type of bread that you can buy, 1 pound of bread. Minimum wage was $1.40. A loaf of bread was 25 cents. You could get about 6.5 loaves of bread an hour. Fast forward to today, a minimum quality bread, the same bread, call it Wonder Bread, the white Wonder Bread, $2 for a pound. $17.50 is the minimum wage here in the province that I'm in. That is 8.5 pounds of bread per hour from 6.5 pounds of bread per hour. It's an hour of labor that is the unit of analysis. The currency is just the medium of exchange. So to say, oh, a dollar doesn't buy what a dollar used to buy. Yeah, but your hour of labor buys so many more dollars than it used to buy. It's the hour of labor that is the unit of analysis, not the currency, the hour of labor. Now, if you find that that in your life that it's getting harder and harder for you to make ends meet, prices are going up and up, let's say your wages aren't keeping up with inflation, then you have to blame the value of your labor. Maybe the value of your labor is what you let go. You didn't put enough in to the value of your labor. Maybe that's the problem, because the economies do change. You know, coal mining is not really a job of the future. Truck driving is not really a job of the future. So if you put in all your effort into truck driving and now you're finding it harder and harder to make ends meet, well, that's because an hour of your labor isn't worth anything. Don't blame the currency. Blame the value of your labor. So I think we've made quick work of this. There is lots backing fiat currency. There is nothing backing crypto. Central banks do not increase the money supply. They control the increase in the money supply that is created by banks lending to you. And the currency does not devalue. It's the wrong unit of an analysis. 1 hour of your labor is the unit of analysis. So if, again, you find, oh, the currency just devalues. No, maybe your labor is just devaluing in the marketplace. How fun was that?